Okay, so project knowledge management. The outcomes are you need to be able to define organizational learning, discuss project learning in the context of organizational learning, discuss the reasons for managing knowledge, discuss the tacit and explicit knowledge and how they are extracted, discuss components of project knowledge management, discuss the benefits of knowledge management, and then also the types of knowledge in project management. Okay, so those are the topics that we will be covering tonight. Okay, so organizational learning is very simple. It's the process by which an organization gains... Hello?
Yes.
Is there a microphone here? It picks me up. Okay, so it's a process by which an organization gains new knowledge about its working environment, its goals, and organizational processes. Okay, so it's about the environment, the goals, and the processes. And the goals is where your projects basically come in, because projects have certain goals that we need to meet, and part of the goals is also the business goals of the organization. And it's an organization-wide continuous process that enhances its collective ability to accept, make sense of, and respond to internal and external change. So remember that in the modern organization, it's about being flexible, being first to market, faster, cheaper, better, all of those words that we use in the modern world. And so knowledge management is supposed to help us to be able to be flexible, to be able to change quicker. Because if we have the knowledge at our fingertips, it's easier to make good decisions. So do you remember, can somebody tell me which of the themes that we've done to date resonates the most with project knowledge management, do you think, and why? Maturity, okay, why?
Because of the continuous process improvement on the website.
Okay, so the continuous improvement, yes. Okay, which other theme then? Because I was thinking of another theme, but that one's not wrong. What other theme do you think interfaces? No?
Project management information systems.
Yes, okay, so the theme that we did last time, project management information systems, that essentially is the tool that we use to capture a lot of the knowledge. Okay. And what about agile project management? What have you guys been doing at the end of each agile process? Lessons learned. Reflection. Okay. And so what is a reflection? It's capturing project knowledge. Okay, so do you see that all of these themes, what's the other theme that we've done? I forget now. Okay, emotional intelligence is the way that it interfaces is also the fact that emotionally intelligent people want to become better, achievement drive, and also communication, and so all of the themes at this level integrate with each other to a large extent. Okay, so that's the definition of organizational learning. So here is the relationship between knowledge and data. Okay? Because remember that when we type data into our PMIS, essentially all that we're doing is we're capturing planned cost, we're capturing actual cost, we are putting in man hours, we are putting in knowledge, lessons learned at the end of the project. But if we don't take that information, now where did I put my, sorry, I just want my pointer. Did I bring my box with pens? My bags have so many. Okay, so if we have data, does that really help us? How does data help us?
we can look at the data, check our performance, measure it against what we wanted to achieve.
Okay, but so as soon as we start doing that, we're moving into the realm of information. Because now what we're looking is we are understanding relationships. Do you understand what I'm saying? So in other words, we planned to have spent 100,000 Rand by the 30th of October. We have spent 50,000 Rand by the 30th of October. So what's the relationship between the planned and the actual? Right, so that's where we start getting information. Okay, and then to get to knowledge, this is when we need to start understanding patterns. So when it is strike season, our projects normally underperform in terms of hours spent during August. Do you agree with me? Because now we are busy understanding the patterns inherent in the data. And so with knowledge management, we want to get at least to the level of knowledge before the data makes sense. Okay, because we can have as much data as we want, but if we don't know how to ask the questions to get to information and to identify the patterns to get to knowledge, we are lost. Okay, because in terms of lessons learned, for example, what often happens is people start capturing lessons learned information and nobody then uses that information. And then somebody high up in management will turn around and say, "Hey guys, but this is the third time that we make the same mistake. Why is that happening?" Because what's happening is we're putting the data in, but nobody is looking at the relationship between the data, and nobody is trying to understand the patterns. All right, so if we do not have a quality plan for the project, the chances are that the project will fail. Those are the types of patterns that we have to identify with our data, because data by itself doesn't help us at all. Okay, so the 3 steps in managing the knowledge process is basically conceive, act, and reflect. So remember do you remember in Agile, there were 4: plan, do, act, change. Sorry? Check. Yeah. So here is act, reflect, conceive. So that's where you check and you change the way that you do it. All right. So there are various people that have various ways of describing this learning cycle. This is the cycle that we will be discussing in this course. So the first thing is create awareness of how and why something has been learned. So why do we need to learn anything about projects? What are our projects failing and that's why we want to learn? Or are our competitors just so much better than us and we're not getting contracts and that's why we want to learn? But do you see that if there isn't an inherent reason over here that you think that you need to learn, it's very difficult to start the process because it's very difficult to get buy-in. That's why I like teaching BTech students, because you guys know what the problem is. You've been in the industry, you work on projects, you've got some work experience, and you understand that you maybe don't know everything. So you can come to my class and I can teach you because you're open to hear and you're open to listen. Whereas kids that are straight out of school are a lot more difficult, because to convince them that they need to learn something is difficult. Do you agree with me? Okay. Then ACT is ensuring learning takes place in an organization. So we need to put processes in place and policies and procedures in place to make sure that learning actually happens. And we will talk more about that as we go on. And then it's not good enough just to sit back and say, oh, well, we know we need knowledge management and we've now put policies and procedures in place. No, remember we also have to reflect, because we have to understand how to create the ideal organizational learning environment. Because the first time we put policies, processes, and procedures in place, they may not work, because they might not be the optimal policies, processes, and procedures. So we need to think about that, or we need to reflect on how did it go. How do we reflect? What questions do we ask?
What went wrong?
Okay, and?
What went well and
What went
can
well?
be improved?
Yeah, okay. So we ask what went well because we're hoping that things happened that went well, that was innovative and was a new way of doing things, and that actually worked. So we don't want to forget that we did something well and it actually worked. And we also ask what went wrong, because we want to find out, is it the process, is it the people, is it the procedure, what is it that is not working for us? Oopsie. I don't know why my computer sometimes does that. All right. I think my computer says now it wants to go back on holiday. I must tell you, I was very, very, very not list to come to work today. Because I really did have a holiday last week.
You did?
Yes. What about my holiday? There's very little to tell. I read 5 books. Now, I know that the minute you start negotiating with students, there will never be class ever again. In my second year, I think this was in my third year, I always ended up being the class rep when I was at university, because I'm so shy and retiring, and I normally was one of the only girls in class. And I'll never forget the one day when I was at university, if it was a mister, you gave him 5 minutes. If it was a doctor, you gave him 10 minutes. And if it was a professor, you gave him 15 minutes, for being late for class. So if the mister isn't there in 5 minutes, then what we did was we called it the massa. Massa meant we just left, because there was no lecturer. And I remember there was a professor, very nice guy. And so, of course, 15 minutes came and went and he wasn't there. And so being the class rep, I said, okay, everybody massa, and we left. And the next day he came to me, he said to me, I heard that you were the one that instigated this. So I was a student myself, so no, I don't negotiate with students. Okay, so let's look. Forces that influence organizational learning. So there will be external forces, so forces external to the organization, and internal forces. So let's look at the internal forces first. So the first thing is the behavior that you will find in the organization, and that is related to your culture. Remember, this is the way that we do things around here. And remember that when you looked at the project maturity, that was what you were looking at, was the behavior of, yes, there are maybe project management principles and practices in place, but how do people actually act on those, right? Then the structure. So the way in which the organization is structured will also influence to what extent learning takes place. So do you think that project learning will take place better in a functional organization or in a matrix organization? Functional.
Because it's specialized.
Okay, but I didn't say functional learning, I said project learning.
Then we got it right. Project leading matrix.
Okay, so let's look at now this fancy thing doesn't want to work. Okay, can you all see here? This is PRR 101. Okay, so if I want to draw this as a functional organization, how do I draw it? Okay, so Doc says I do this.
No.
Alright, and then what? Who sits here? Functional managers. Okay, and who sits under the functional managers? Our staff. Okay, so each block that I'm drawing here is staff. Okay, and how do projects happen? How do projects happen in a functional organization?
For the project coordinator.
Okay, and where does the project coordination sit?
Must put them around the function because he has to coordinate those things.
Okay, and now, so this is the functional organization. Now let's talk about a strong matrix, because remember there are 3 different types of matrices, but let's look at the strongest one. So there's the weak, the balanced, and the strong. So what happens in a strong matrix organization? Where does project management happen? Or project coordination happen? On the top?
You've got manager of project management.
Okay, so in a
You've got a project manager of project something.
In a strong matrix, at the same level as the functional manager, we have a manager of project managers, and underneath this, we have our various project managers. And so this project manager will say get these resources assigned to his or her project. Okay, do you see the difference here? Okay, so now I'll ask you the question again. In which structure do you think that project knowledge management is going to happen best? Why in the strong matrix?
Because we got knowledge sharing between different functions.
Okay, all right. So in this, you see that in the strong matrix, firstly, you have a person who is the dedicated project manager who manages all the resources, okay, across the different functions, and who then has the responsibility of capturing the knowledge, etc., etc. All right. Here, we only have a project coordinator. This person is part-time. They're not full-time. Their job isn't to be a project manager. Their job is to be a functional manager, but part-time they do project coordination. All right? So if it's this functional manager, let's call it functional manager A, who is, for example, the project coordinator. They will probably capture all the lessons that are applicable to their function. But the other lessons on the other functions will probably go missing. Okay, so that's what we say, or that's what we mean when we say structure influences organizational learning. Does that make sense? Right, then operations. So how the organization operates and to what extent we are project-based or we are operations-based will also affect to what extent project learning will take place. Right, because if we are a mining organization and we mainly do operations, so mainly every day we go and chop some rock out of the hills, and that rock is processed. Operations knowledge management will probably be a lot stronger than the project's knowledge management, because our projects are maybe an upgrade project here and there, a maintenance project, but we're not really a project-based organization. Our revenue does not mainly come from projects. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, then the external forces, politics. Why do you think politics will influence organizational learning?
Because having problems, so that also hampers the reaction in terms of the strategy being implemented.
Okay, so you're saying the strategy of the organization is influenced by the politics of the organization. Okay. Anybody else? There was another hand somewhere. Who was it? Was it you?
The political decision making in a country
Yes.
affects multiple areas.
Mm.
So project management is one of those.
Okay.
So if, for example, with big projects, you take kilometer area.
Yes.
Should there be unforeseen circumstances in terms of relationship between the country and whoever initiated the project, which I think will be hosted at UN level, then it might withdraw.
Okay, so what he's saying is that you don't always want to tell the client everything. Because if the client has all the knowledge, they might stop the project. Okay? So there's a level in which organizations protect their knowledge. Is that what you're basically saying? Because, I mean, if you think about the square kilometer array, what happened there was a bidding between Australia and South Africa. Okay? So in other words, the South African scientists would not have wanted to share their lessons learned with the Australian scientists, and the same the other way around, because each party was trying to capture the contract. So at the end of the day, for the project as a whole, learning was difficult because they didn't want to share, and the project managers had a problem, because the problem with technical people is that they normally like sharing. So the minute you put a technical Australian and a technical South African on the square kilometer array together in the same place, they start sharing, and you don't necessarily want that. Okay, but so you can see politics of the project, politics of the country as well can affect the way in which organizations learn. Okay, economics, because the thing about organizational learning is that it costs money and it takes effort. Remember when we were talking about the project management information system last time, we said that it's not just software that we feed data to and voila, there is the answer to all of our questions. No, it takes money and effort. And unfortunately, the economics and the way that you perceive knowledge management can be a barrier to organizational learning. Then the next one is socio-cultural. What does socio-cultural mean?
About the environment in which the organization is operating.
Okay, so the social environment in which the organization is operating. So do you think that we have a better social, cultural environment in South Africa than what they have in Germany? Why not?
I think with us, there's still a lot of mistrust between the different races, so from different backgrounds. And within that, there's also the coding of information in terms of sharing. So at the end of the day, it's got a ecology balance to be able to.
Okay, so in other words, the fact that we come from such a diverse country with 11 diverse cultures can be a barrier to organizational learning, right? Because firstly, in the organization itself, I might say I'm a white female, so I'm not going to share anything. Sorry, are you Tswana or what race are you? Sorry? Tsonga. So I'm not going to share this information with a Tsonga male. Really? I only share what I know with white females. Okay, guys, class was nice. Bye-bye. Okay, so so do you understand that happens in our environment? The other thing that happens is an organization comes from Germany and moves into an area in South Africa where they want to implement a project that has to do with the community. Can you see the red lights flashing? Okay, because they don't understand the culture. Yes. Okay, and I mean the Germans, you know, they are like, we know everything and we know it right. We know how to do it right. And do you know that if you jaywalk in Germany, the people on the street shout at you. And they say, 99999, because they don't jaywalk in Germany. You can be in the smallest little town in the middle of nowhere, and there hasn't been a car passed for the last 20 years. But if you do not cross at the traffic light or at the stop streets, the people will shout at you. Now, I mean, that's a little bit different to our culture, wouldn't you say? Just a slight. Okay, then. So you all understand the social-cultural challenges that we face. Okay, then technological challenges, what do you think that would be?
Changing the technology.
Okay.
Development.
Okay, so the rapid change in technology development. I don't know where we are at now, but it was every 6 months we had new technology. We're probably sitting at new technology every 3 months now. I don't know, I haven't read the latest literature on that. Sorry?
The recent
Yes.
it has slowed down.
It goes down.
It has slowed down.
Slow down. Oh, okay.
It's no longer going.
Yeah, but if you read about the newest innovations that they're busy with carbon computers and stuff like that, I think that maybe we've reached the envelope on the silicon, but I think carbon is the next step, and that's going to be a quantum leap again. And yeah, so yeah, but I mean, still, the speed of processes and things like that still improves and increases and whatever every 6 months, I think. Sorry?
I say it's not rapid as compared to.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, if yeah. But you know that the guy who was the I don't know what he was called, the president of the Patent Law Society in America. You know what statement he made in the year 1900? He said everything that will ever be invented has been invented. That was in 1900. Now think about what happened from 1900 to now. You know, so maybe, you know, we think that there is no, you know, we basically have all the technology. But I think the other part of the technological influence is the fact that not everybody has kept up with the technology. And that is also an obstacle to organizational learning, because a lot of times organizational learning takes place via technology. And so if you have people that are technologically challenged, I remember my violin teacher at university, that was just when ATMs came out. And she said no, she will never ever learn to use an ATM. She will always go into the bank to do her banking. And I wonder now, 20 years later, whether she actually does use an ATM card. My son has now 2 ATM cards because he's now got an account with ABSA and he opened an account with FNB because he wants PayPal, you see, and he wants e-bucks and, you know. So he comes to me very proud with these 2 cards of his and he said to me, "Mother, did you also have 2 ATM cards at my age?" I said to him, "No, at your age I had a bank book." Okay, but so do you see that the fact that people don't want to keep up with technology and they see technology as a threat also can stop organizational learning? Right, then ecological. So what does ecological mean? See, I'm too tired today. The environment. Okay.
For example, my name, where the water that the emitters consume becomes a problem based on that.
Practical example, acid drainage spill that it's underneath Johannesburg.
Yes. Okay, and how does that affect organizational learning, do you think?
From the reason that whatever that is going to happen now in terms of addressing that, the current mining companies should learn how then do you deal with the spillage or the mines that you are closing down in order to cap the water rising and how to then drain it.
Okay, but do you think, yes?
There's also knowing which with regards to because no one wants to be
Yes. Exactly.
Companies wouldn't be such information, and so the other companies.
Yeah, so they don't want to actually even say that they were responsible. So they're not even trying to learn about it, and they're just clamping down, and everybody is just quiet, and they shoot any whistleblowers. Okay. Yeah, so that's okay. And then legal. How do you think legal influences organizational learning? Compliance? What type of compliance?
Government acts of that country.
Yes.
Changing legislations in terms of taxation, company registration, as it's a constrict, and then also when it comes to tax. Are they giving leeway to companies which have a special tax for small business? Those are some of the legal issues.
But how does that affect organizational learning?
It affects it in the sense that if then there is too much tax being implemented on the companies, there's not enough development for the so once the money goes back to the government, and then what happens with the money to the government? So in terms of making sure that everybody learns.
Okay, so what you're talking about is the learning of the studies of actual employees in the organization. Okay, but remember, organizational learning is a wider concept than that. It's what knowledge do we as an organization possess? So what's in my head and your head and so-and-so's head? Okay, and legal, I think, is very similar to ecological in the sense that if we're doing something illegal or something that's maybe a little bit not so legal, that's going to influence how we are prepared to learn. Because it's going to influence what information we are prepared to share. All right. And things like intellectual property obviously also falls under legal. Because if it's my intellectual property, I'm not going to share it with you if there isn't anything in it for me. Okay. Sorry? What do you think?
There was information divulged in terms of salary scales of different mines about miners realized. So that information was confidential but was shared, hence the agreement was the ground.
Yes. Okay, and possibly the sharing of the information was actually illegal. Because most organizations have a clause that says you're not allowed to discuss your salary. Okay. Right, but so do you see the forces that can influence organizational learning and how they influence organizational learning? Now let's hope my computer will be good and just go to the next page. Okay, so this diagram actually comes out of a master's thesis done by one of my students at the University of Pretoria, and the way he saw the model is that for a project, you have some or other new project, you then have a post-project review, and you then capture the lessons learned. Okay? But in your organization, there is obviously a whole lot of these projects that are happening. Okay? So you somehow have to capture all the project learnings, and in order to do that, you need knowledge management. So there we can talk about the system, the software, the how, the process, the policy of how to do it. But you also need the leadership. Because if there isn't leadership that is giving direction and saying, this is why we are sharing the knowledge, this is why we need to capture the knowledge, this and this knowledge has to be tacit, this and this knowledge can be explicit, we don't know where we are going. All right, okay, sorry, here I see is the processes, procedures, and the knowledge database. Sorry, that is just your high-level knowledge management. This is where your processes, procedures, and knowledge database comes in. But so do you see that this is the computer or the software that's sitting there capturing all of it? But that's not the be-all and end-all. If we don't understand knowledge management as an organization, and we don't have the leadership, and we don't have the culture. I don't know if I've told you the story before, but many years ago I worked at Kentron, which is now the Now Dynamics, I think it is, for 3 months. And it was the most awful experience of my life, working experience. Because at the time, Kentron was going through a very bad patch, and they were busy laying off people, and things were very unstable, especially in the military industry at that stage. That was about 1999. So, that was when government was not renewing some of the military contracts, and most of the military suppliers had to start getting overseas contracts in order to be viable and to keep going. And what was so terrible was the organizational culture was a culture of, this is my knowledge and I'm not sharing it with you. You're a Tonga male and I'm not sharing it with you. And so, especially as a white female working in the military industry, it was always difficult because I'm different. But especially in that time, in that specific organization, I really, really felt very, very unloved, but, unwanted, because nobody would talk to me. Nobody wanted to share any information with me because I was too young. I was a female, and then I moved from there to the CSIR, and the change was like day and night. Because at the CSIR, it's about knowledge sharing. People want to share. They tell you, they, bore you to tears, because they come and they call you into their office and say, come, I want to show you this exciting formula, and they explain the formula to you to the nth detail. And I'm not a detail person. I like a big picture, so I get bored. But do you understand the difference? Okay. And so, of course, if we want to have knowledge sharing, we need to have a culture which allows that. And unfortunately, sometimes one has to change the culture. And if you can't change the culture, you are never going to get organizational knowledge sharing. I don't know how things are now these days at Kentron anymore, but that was my experience when I worked there for 3 months. Okay, and then the last thing is knowledge transfer and absorptive capacity. Now, absorptive capacity is to what extent can we accept this knowledge that is coming in. I was reading a newspaper article this morning about the Minister of Trade and Industry saying that she's very concerned about the fact that overseas companies apply for scarce skills permits, work permits for people to come and work in South Africa, because she doesn't see that there is a concerted effort to actually transfer the knowledge that these specialists, these so-called scarce skills people have into South Africa. Okay? But now the other side of the question is, to what extent do we, as South Africans, have skilled people that can absorb that knowledge? Do you understand? And so in an organization, you can have the most brilliant knowledge management system, but if your people are not prepared to, okay, because prepared to is the one side of it, absorb the knowledge, or are not competent to absorb the knowledge, it's not going to work. Yes?
I'm sorry, but I've heard that speech like so many times. It's just a bit tiring, because it's like saying every politician that's stating the effect of saying the youth today does not want to learn.
But I don't think that's true.
The youth today, they are so eager to learn, but the systems are not ready to absorb. And also, even if you go into an organization, the culture is so backdated that they cannot adjust to the way the youth live today, the way they see things. Because in today's youth, we get bored by doing the same thing over and over and over. You find that somebody is a professional, yet stroke DJ, yet stroke photographer, stroke this, stroke that, because they just want their mind to be active.
Yes.
But the culture of that of many organizations are not adapted to that level yet.
Okay, because you know that you are generation. Okay, and for us baby boomers, that's a bit difficult. Yes, so I agree with you that there is this disconnect between the different generations, and so when one designs the knowledge management, you must understand the demographic of who is in the organization and how these different people learn. Because apart from that, we also have different ways of learning. You know, I think that in the old days, learning by rote was the way in which I definitely went to school and how I was taught to learn, and which is why I did very badly at school, because I hate learning by rote. You know, because I will, my son I see is exactly the same. The minute I grasp the concept, I want to move on to the next concept. So I don't want to practice. So I mean, I suppose I'm also Generation Y in a sense, although I wear a watch. But so yes, so I'm not saying by saying that I don't think that it's true that the youth don't want to learn, because otherwise I wouldn't be a lecturer at a university.
But I also think we do have those qualified in government, but they are not given the platform where they can showcase their skills because of red tape. Maybe
Yes.
they're not politically connected.
Yes, and
it's
politics.
like it hampers the whole production or the performance of the organization. So at the end of the day, it's a multi-layered
problem.
complex situation. Because I think in as far as the media has portrayed South Africa, it is portrayed as very lazy people who are not dynamic, innovative. But the truth be told, we are very much dynamic, we are very much innovative, but the political structure in its current form does not grasp or adapt to.
But I mean, you know, if you work on the mines and you see how the workers can actually sabotage the systems to make them not work and how innovative they are, you know, you somehow think that, yes, we have a lot of innovation capability, but we don't have the will sometimes to use it to I mean, if you think of the crooks, how they are always ahead. Doesn't matter what fancy technology we introduce, they always, that, you know, we used to have car alarms where you press the button and the car locks. Then they jammed that. You know, those people are very clever. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so projects provide exceptional platforms for learning. Okay, one of the reasons is because projects happen in phases, and because projects happen in phases, we can build in certain points where we learn. Whereas with operations, because it's something that sort of happens over the next 20 years, we don't necessarily stop and reflect. Whereas on projects, that's part of what we need to do, is we need to learn. So that's why projects, if you have projects in the organization, they tend to encourage a learning culture. So project-based learning is one of the main ways in which organizations interact with and are changed by their environment. Because when you say you are working in this mining organization that we were talking about, which is operating and trying to extract ore, but they now have an upgrade project, all of a sudden huge organizational learning has to take place. Because the upgrade implies that people have to learn new things and they have to change the way in which they are doing things. You understand? So one can use that as a vehicle to then upgrade the knowledge in the organization. Okay, so the methods for sharing knowledge in projects, project to project learning. So that's where you pass ideas from one project to another. Project to business. So this is movement of experience from project teams to the central business function. So here are projects that are happening over here at the bottom of the organization. We extract the knowledge here and it actually impacts at the top level of the organization. Then the last one is business to project. Because remember that at the top level, hopefully, your managers are also into continuous improvement and in continuous learning. So when they learn new things, they also share that to the projects. And that way, the projects also improve. Okay, so here are your main project learning mechanisms. Okay, so here we have the different levels of analysis. Because as we've spoken before, on projects we have individuals, we have the group or the team, the project team, and then we have the organizational level, right? And then the three learning processes, or the main learning processes by which we accumulate knowledge is experience, okay? If I tell my 2-year-old not to put their hand on a hot stove, will they listen to me? No. Okay, but if they've put their hand on the hot stove and they've burnt their finger, will they listen to me next time?
Yes.
Okay, so you see, experience is one of the ways in which we accumulate knowledge. And unfortunately, sometimes we have to bump our own heads and we have to learn from our own mistakes because we don't want to learn from other people's mistakes. All right. Then there's knowledge accumulation, and this is basically where we're not just doing things and accumulating knowledge by experience, but here we actually codify. We start thinking in an abstract manner about this. So I'm busy chopping this block of stone. Why am I chopping the block of stone? I'm chopping it because it goes into the cathedral. Do you understand? So it's the abstract, taking that practical experience that I'm getting in life, but making it more abstract, because that means I can transfer it. So today I'm working and I'm chopping blocks, and that's going into the cathedral. Tomorrow I'm chopping down trees, but that also goes into the cathedral. You understand that it's that abstract level of thinking where you can start taking what you've learned today and apply it to something which is new but similar tomorrow. So if the child has put their hand on the stove and they've burnt their hand, if they're outside by the braai, you can tell them, but remember when you burnt your hand on the stove, it's going to be the same pain. And they're much more likely to then listen to you. Okay, and that's where the knowledge accumulation happens. And then the knowledge codification, this is where we now make sure that everything that we've learned is written down. Okay, so here we have the lessons learned database, the project management process, the process maps, and the drawings at the organizational level. At the project level, we have the project plans, the milestones and deadlines, the meeting minutes, the minutes of meetings, project historical files, project lessons learned databases. So these things are codified, okay? But remember, it comes from the experience and from the knowledge accumulation, and it then goes into codification. Because often what also happens in organizations is we do the experience part, we then accumulate the knowledge by saying, okay, let's have a project review, what went well, what went badly, but then when we start the next project, we just ignore that. Okay, so that means we haven't properly done the codification, because we haven't codified it in a manner that it is reusable.
Would I be wrong if I would say codification by artifact?
Yes. Codification is where you take the knowledge and you put it in a form where the next person can come and take it. Okay, so it has to be written down in some way, or maybe not written down. I mean, I can make a video and post it to YouTube. That's also codification. All right. In the olden days, we would have just written it down. These days, we can take a picture. Okay. All right, and then I suppose the first question we should have asked ourselves is, why do we manage knowledge? Why bother? Okay, so the first thing is it gives us a competitive advantage, but it's not just a competitive advantage, it's a sustainable competitive advantage. Because it's not just this time that we're going to make a success of the project, we're also going to be able to make a success of it next time. All right? And so do you see the link again to project maturity? All right. So we can have shorter life cycle of innovation, knowledge as an infinite resource, direct bottom line returns. Because remember, with any of these wishy-washy concepts like knowledge management, we cannot sell it in the organization if we cannot show the bottom line returns that we're going to get. Then it is also a way to manage overload. Because how many of you read every single email that comes into your inbox every day? Do you? Wow. How many emails do you get every day? I'll tell you a story of what happened to me. I'm presenting a paper at a conference on Thursday. So about 3 weeks ago, I get a call from the conference organizer. And she says to me, Professor Barry, you haven't responded to tell me whether the title of your paper is correct. I said to her, oh, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't know that I should have done that. She said, yes, no, it was in the email that I sent you to tell you that your paper was accepted. And you know the mistake she made was the heading of the email was, your paper has been accepted. So what did I do? I suffered from information overload. So I read the thing and I said, hey, great, I've got a paper in at the conference, and I went on. And when I actually looked back, because then I thought this was very interesting, because this has never happened to me before at a conference. And when I looked back and I went and looked at all the other conference information that I've got over the years, what they do is they say such and such a conference, and then you have to actually open the email, and then in the email they tell you that your conference paper has been accepted. You see? And that's what happens, is that we need to manage knowledge, because we need to break it down and we need to package it in a manner so that the person that needs the knowledge will have access to it. Okay, because if Doctor is the electrical engineer on the project, he doesn't really care that on the last project, the fact that they cut 1 day off the setting of the cement meant that the foundations crumbled. He doesn't really care about that. Do you understand? So now if he has to go and read through all the lessons learned of the previous project, and there are only maybe 5 lessons that are applicable to what he is interested in, it's going to waste his time. And that's why we manage knowledge, because remember this diagram where we had at the beginning, the data. This is at the level of where the lessons learned lie. But if we haven't done anything to understand the relations and to understand the patterns and to say, okay, this lesson belongs with electrical problems, this lesson belongs with civil problems. So do you remember with your first assignment, I was very impressed with a group that went and categorized the lessons learned and said that this was leadership, do you remember that? And that was because what they had done was they had taken the data and they'd already converted it into knowledge. Okay, does that make sense? And that's why we manage knowledge, is because we try and put the things that belong together. Globalization, because of globalization, we have decreased cycle times. You have project teams that sit in America that design, that then hand over to a project team in India that continues with the design. What? Oh. I'll update it another day. And then there's another project team that sits in New Zealand that takes over the design. Okay, so things happen a lot quicker. But now what if the person who sits in America has this very interesting thought and decides, no, I'm going to change the design. Right? So it's now no longer going to be pink, it's now going to be blue. But they don't tell the person who sits in India. So the person who sits in India still works on the concept that it's going to be pink. And then when it gets to the guy in New Zealand, he actually colors it in so that it is pink. And now the guy in America says, hey, but it was supposed to be blue. Do you understand? And so because of that type of globalization that's happening, we need to learn how to share knowledge and how to make knowledge explicit and how to manage knowledge. Okay, rapid change. We've spoken about the technological change. Let me try and make this a little bit bigger. Is that better? Okay, sorry. Okay, so rapid change. We've already spoken about the changes in technology, and you know, in the electronics industry. Anyway, the fact that technology changes so rapidly means that if I start with a certain component today and it takes me 6 months to design my product, by the time my design is complete, it's already obsolete. Because there's already, by the time after 6 months that I've now got a product that's working, I suddenly get a message from the supplier that, because they send you a message that says this product will no longer be supported in 6 months from now. All right. Okay, so I need to be plugged in to the system of knowledge so that I know where is the technology going. Okay, because I cannot use an XT computer anymore today to write my software because it's not going to work. All right. Embedded knowledge. So a lot of knowledge is embedded these days. So we were talking about the fact that we want to know what is electrical knowledge and what is civil knowledge. These days, that's the difference between the two is not always that clear. All right. So when we decide to classify the knowledge, we better decide very carefully how we classify the knowledge, because there might be something in that civil knowledge that affects the electrical guy. Okay, so we don't want to overload people with knowledge, but we also want to put enough pointers there so that people can pick up and say, oh, okay, keyword, electrical cabling in the foundation. Okay, there was a problem on the civil side last time which might affect my cabling this time. And then the other thing is the blurring of the distinction between service and manufacturing firms. You know, in the old days, Ford made motor cars. And so if you bought a Ford, you got a mechanical vehicle that will get you from point A to B. If you look at adverts of cars these days, are they selling us to get from point A to B anymore? What are they selling us? Yeah. Accessories. There must be at least 12 cup holders. Otherwise, what did you say? Yes, safety. All of those things. But so do you see that manufacturing is no longer just manufacturing? Because you're actually selling a service. And there's a difference between a service and a product.
These days they are actually gearing up for fuel efficiency.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And ecological protection and that type of thing. And so if I am a poor person living in Kliptown and in Soweto, and my only dream has been to have a car, to own a car one day, do I care whether the car runs on petrol or whether it runs on electricity? Or whether it's good for the environment? Probably not. Okay, and probably the petrol one is better because there is no electricity in Kliptown. All the electricity there is illegal. Do you understand? And so now you as the car manufacturer are trying to sell me this ecologically friendly car, but I actually couldn't care less. And so you need to inform me, and you need to train me, and you need to educate me as to why this is important. You understand? Okay, then downsizing. Because downsizing happens in our current economy, and I mean, we went through a recession while they say it was a downturn, but I think it was actually a recession a few years back, and people lost their jobs and whatever. The problem is when people lose their jobs, you lose the knowledge. All right. And so you need to understand that when you downsize. So have we captured all the knowledge that we need before we downsize? Okay, and then the last thing why we manage knowledge is the sharing of best practices. Because we want to improve, we want to avoid reinventing the wheel. And you know, Google, do you know what the slogan for Google Scholar is? It says, stand on the shoulders of giants. Because Google Scholar basically gives you access to all the knowledge that other people have already built up. So don't go and reinvent the wheel. Build on the shoulders of giants, stand on the shoulders of giants. Okay. Okay, so then we get to the actual nitty-gritty of what or how do we take this animal called knowledge and how do we transport it? How do we move it from one individual to the other? So one of the concepts is project knowledge extraction. So it's the process of translating data and information into knowledge. So remember, data is just the loose standing points. Information is where we've looked at the relationships, and knowledge is where we understand the patterns. Does that make sense to everybody? That comes from that table, that diagram that we spoke about right at the beginning. So it's the process of making use of various sources of information to create a cohesive or structured knowledge bank. All right, and we've already spoken about the structure and that it's important to structure. The extraction of knowledge from a person or a group of people is becoming a growing factor in how business is conducted in the 21st century. So we can no longer, as 21st century workers, just be people that you can lock in an office and you just put the pizza under the door and the work comes out. Okay, because of the fact that we have to share knowledge, because everything is becoming more complex and becoming more interdisciplinary. So that means that we need to develop skills of emotional intelligence. Because emotional intelligence is the skill that helps us to share the knowledge. Come on. Okay, so there are two types of knowledge. The one is tacit knowledge. So that is the knowledge that I have in my head. Okay, now unfortunately, if I want to know what knowledge is in Noel's head, I can bring my chainsaw and I can, cut off the top of his head and I can try and look in his brain, but that's still not going to help me. All right, so with tacit knowledge, the individual may not even be consciously aware that he has such knowledge or she has such knowledge. It's like, has it ever happened to you that you're busy with a everyday task that you do every day, and suddenly you think, okay, but how do I really plait my hair? Because I can plait my hair, but how do I do it? And suddenly you don't know how to do it anymore, because it's such an automatic thing that you do. And has it ever happened to you? I know when I used to play music, the worst thing I could do was to, in the middle of the piece, say to myself, okay, but what note comes next? Because immediately you go into a different side of your brain and immediately you lose the flow. Right, and with tacit knowledge, you don't even know sometimes that you have that knowledge. And explicit knowledge is the knowledge that the individual holds consciously in mental focus, in a form that can be easily communicated to others. And that's why, at the end of the day, who was it? I think it was Confucius that said that if you want to really know how something works, you have to do it. Okay, because if you just see it or if you just hear it, it's not the same as actually doing it. But I believe that when you go from doing to teaching, that's when you really understand it. Because when you start teaching it, you have to understand it to such a level that you can share what you've learned with others. And that's a whole new level of understanding. All right? And so that's what teachers do, is they try and take knowledge and they try and make it explicit in a way that everybody can understand it. And unfortunately, at the end of the day, if knowledge is not explicit in the organization, that knowledge is very prone to be lost. Because if we don't even know what knowledge we have, how are we going to know what knowledge should we capture? And how are we going to know what knowledge we should be handing over to the younger generation? Okay, and often you get people that have been working in the same job for 30 years and they're very, very good at what they do, but they can't train anybody. They just don't know because they haven't made the step from tacit to explicit. Okay. Okay, so this is basically how knowledge extraction works. Okay, so let's start over here, and let's say that we have tacit to tacit knowledge transfer. So this is socialization. I was watching a fascinating experiment that they did. I don't know where. It was one of these sociological experiments that they did. And what they did was they got these people together in a room, and one of the people in the room was the subject. And the other 5 people in the room were all in on the experiment. And then what they did was they rang a bell. And whenever the bell was rung, the 5 people that were in on the experiment would stand up. And then this poor person that wasn't in on the experiment would eventually stand up, And then they sort of repeated this on a quite a regular basis, and then eventually this person who was not part of the experiment, who was the subject, would be in the room with 3 new people. And then they would ring the bell, and then that person would stand up and tell the other people, no, come on, you must stand up. and that is tacit to tacit, because it's because of socialization. Right, because everybody else is doing it, so I'm also going to do it. But I don't really know why I'm doing it. But, you know, everybody around me is doing X, Y, Z, so I'm going to do X, Y, Z. And that's how our teens learn. All right. And then we have where we take the tacit to explicit. And this is externalization. All right. So this is where I say, the subject says, I don't know why we have to stand up. I just know that when the bell rings, we have to stand up. Okay, because he's now explaining, he's externalizing this social behavior that he's learned. All right, and then we get linking explicit knowledge. So this is where we combine the combination. So this is where we combine explicit to explicit. So the subject says to the people, when the bell rings, you must stand up. And they say, but why? And then he says, no, well, because every time the bell rang in the past, everybody in the room stood up. And then they say, okay, but does it make sense for us to stand up? What's going to happen if we don't stand up? You understand? And so let's say that we now have a spike in the chairs, so that if the people don't stand up, we spike them. And then they suddenly say, oh, okay, that's why we must stand up. Do you understand? In Disney World, there's this one ride where you sit on a bench, and it's 4D. And then at one stage, there are all these ants running around on the screen. And then they have something in the bench that actually pushes up against you. And it actually feels as if these, I don't know, it was cockroaches. It feels as if these cockroaches are running underneath your legs. And then there's another place where the bee stings one of the characters. And then there's the sting that comes out in the back in your back. So my son and I did that one twice. The first time we got caught out, and the second time we went and watched everybody else's reactions. Okay, and that's the explicit to explicit. Then you need to also take the explicit and make it tacit. Because remember that when it's tacit, I'm doing it because I know how to do it. So think about it, those of you that can drive. How many of you can drive? Okay, hold on. Let's make it something that all of you can do. How many of you can write? Can't you write? Oh, you can. No, my parents were so poor, and we were 5 kids. So my brother learned to write and I learned to read because we were too poor. No, I'm joking. Anyway, so think about your first day in grade 1 where you took that crayon and you had to write your name. Okay, and it was like an effort. And I can still remember I used to spell it. I used to say streepie, because that's the hyphen in my name. L-O-E-S-E. That's how I used to write my name. Do I still write my name like that? Do you think so? You think every time I write my name these days and I type it and I go Marie-Louise, I think no, I don't, because that has gone from explicit to tacit, because I've got mastery over that. Think about when you learn to read. If you wanted to read the word cat, you had to sound it, cat. Now when you see the word cat, okay, and so that's become explicit to tacit. Right, and so a lot of what we try to do at university is to actually teach you skills so that those skills become tacit skills. All right, so when I talk to you about a project, I no longer have to explain the nitty-gritty of what is the project made up of, what is it, it's got phases, it's complex, you know what I'm saying, because I've told you all of that. That's tacit in your heads. So when I say a project, you know what I'm talking about, because it's become tacit in your heads. All right, I hope so. I really, really hope so. Okay, and then tacit to tacit we've spoken about. So do you understand this spiral? And of course, if you think about something like reading, you start here where a teacher knows how to do it and they explain, okay, hold on. They know how to do it and they explain to you how to do it. Right? And now we can read cat. And now the next time we see cat, we read it without even realizing we're reading it. Okay? And now we can tell our friend how to read cat. But now the next word is catalyst. Okay? So the first part of it, we can understand the cat part of it. But the list, we don't understand yet. Okay, so we have to go through that spiral where somebody helps us to understand it. It becomes explicit. Do you see what I'm saying? And now we've mastered, say, English, and now we want to learn French. And now we're back again in the middle. Do you follow? Okay, but it's easier to start learning to read French once I've learned to read English, because at least I know I have the skills of reading. If I now want to start learning to read Arabic, that's very different, because the skills are no longer the same. Okay, do you follow? And that's why in this course we prefer that you have some work experience and you have some knowledge of projects, because at least you already have some tacit to explicit information here, which we can then take and we can take you further on the spiral. Because if I start with you there on the spiral, it's easier to get you here than if I start with you there on the spiral. Okay, and that's the way knowledge works. Any knowledge builds on each other. You know, I missed the whole of grade 10 physics or science. I didn't do grade 10 science because I decided not to take science when I went from grade 9 to grade 10. And then at the end of grade 10, I suddenly decided, no, I don't want to study music anymore. I want to study engineering. And I suddenly had to take science. So to this day, I still don't know the colors of the rainbow because I never had to learn them. I never had to make them explicit to myself. Grade 11 and 12 science I know everything about because I had to pass that and I had to do well in it. But that part I missed out on. Okay, so this is just the description of socialization, the description of externalization, internalization, which we've discussed in that. Okay, and then facilitation, that's the process of taking explicit knowledge and transferring it to a person in explicit form. So that's basically what lecturers and teachers are supposed to do. They're supposed to facilitate knowledge transfer. And if you ever work in an organization and you want to learn new things, try and find somebody who is good with making tacit knowledge explicit. Because boy, if you find somebody like that, you hook onto them and you hold onto them and you learn as much as you can from them. Okay, because those people are the ones that will be your life mentors at the end of the day. Because they can help you. Yes, doctor.
So from now on, should we call you a facilitator, not a lecturer?
You can call me a facilitator. I prefer the term facilitator.
Thanks for bringing up this concept of mentoring. I'm trying to link the mentoring and this knowledge sharing. And I'm struggling to link the two, because normally the mentor will assist you to achieve some other things, but the thing I'm struggling with is sometimes the mentor is assisting to achieve something that he also doesn't know.
Yes, that can be. But normally you find that a mentor will be somebody with life experience. So it'll be somebody with knowledge. So it'll be somebody that is really able to match those patterns and see the patterns. So you might show them a new picture, but because, so it's like, say I can read English and now I want to learn to read French. The pattern recognition skills are the same. So the mentor is a very, very good reader. So they might not know French, but they know about the process of how to learn to read, and they know about the pattern recognition. Does that make sense? Okay, but in my experience, most of my mentors in life were people that had already made the mistakes that I was still going to make. And I didn't always listen to them.
And you did it.
Yes. Because that's unfortunately the best way to learn. Well, not the best way, but the most painful way to learn. Okay, so this is then basically the knowledge management, the project knowledge management process. So we have the knowledge extraction, and this we know very well how to do. We do lessons learned, we ask what went well, what went badly, what can improve. Then we need to convert the knowledge. All right, so this is when we need to take the knowledge and we need to look for the relationships. We need to understand what information is in this knowledge. Then there is the knowledge transfer. So even if we're the same project team, we still have to make sure that we transfer what we've learned into the next project. Because very often we say, okay, project done and dusted, let's forget about that. Let's move on to the next one. And then we make the same mistakes because we haven't done the reflection. We haven't thought about it, and we haven't thought, but how can we improve it in future? Right, and then we have knowledge utilization. Okay, so we not only extracting, converting, and transferring the knowledge, we also utilizing the knowledge on future projects so that we can get better. Okay, and this is basically just the questions that we can ask. What was supposed to happen? What actually happened? So this is where we look at the planned and the actual. Why were there differences? What can we learn from this experience? So will we do it differently next time? Will we put our hand on the hot stove again next time? Hopefully not. Okay, so this is basically the same information as on that slide where we said, why do we manage knowledge? Because it's about the competitive experience, the fact that the experiences and knowledge from past projects can serve as a base for future projects and help solve different obstacles and issues. Documented knowledge information about each performed project is beneficial to customers of the project as as project outcomes may be delivered in a more efficient way. So next time we can do the project better. And access to good and bad practices to improve implementation of future projects and help to fill in the knowledge gaps. Okay, then we've already also spoken about this to a certain extent. So what are the components of knowledge management? Firstly, we have the people. Because remember, the people are the ones in whose heads the knowledge sit. And from even if we have a computer system, the information still has to go from one head into the system and to the other head. Okay, because only the people can actually do things with the knowledge. Because although we try to teach computers, computers are not human. And they can only learn to a limited extent. Whereas we as humans have amazing brains and we can actually learn quite amazing things. Then the organizational factors, which we've already spoken about. Remember, we spoke about the 6 external and the 3 internal organizational factors. And then technology. You need access to technology in order to do knowledge management. Yes, maybe if it's a small project. I remember when I was at university, the lecturers would always say, yeah, you can just take a cigarette packet and you could sit and you can draw the design on the back of a cigarette packet. Have you ever heard that one? Or am I too old now? Because nobody smokes anymore.
Sounds like that.
But nobody smokes anymore. Right, but these days, because of the fact that our projects are complex, multidisciplinary, etc., we can no longer just, write it on the back of a cigarette packet. We need to now have a system where we can actually codify it, where we can use keywords so that we can exploit the knowledge to the best extent. So basically all that the technology is there for is to enhance communication and to facilitate the way in which we get access to that information. Oh, we have to have Dilbert on knowledge management. So Dogbert says, we'll need to disguise the fact that you're a moron. And then the poor employee says, and then Dogbert says, ironically, the best way is to become an expert in something called knowledge management. And so the dumb employee says, we must develop knowledge optimization initiatives to leverage our key learning. And the pointy-head boss thinks, smart. Okay, so basically what Dogbert does is he just teaches the moron the right keywords. And unfortunately, keywords will only take you that far. At some stage, you have to deliver. Okay, so what leads to failure? So if we fail to align the knowledge management efforts with the organization's strategic objectives, obviously the knowledge management is going to fail, because nobody's going to be interested in what we're doing. Creation of repositories without addressing the need to manage the content. Okay, I don't think I need to go into that in detail. It's what we were talking about, the PMIS. It's not just software. You have to manage it. You have to make sure that the correct data is entered and that everybody has the same knowledge or the same understanding of the data that goes in. Failure to understand and connect knowledge management into individuals' daily work activities. So at the end of the project, you sit me down, you tell me what went well, what can be improved, and now I go on to the next project. So am I ever going to do anything different? You understand? If you don't remind me to say, remember on the last project we did this and this, and we mustn't do that same mistake again. You are busy making that same mistake again. Right. An overemphasis on formal learning efforts as a mechanism for sharing knowledge. Remember when we spoke about the spiral, there's all those different mechanisms. And at the end of the day, what we want, because explicit is what everybody can understand, because that's what's in writing. We think everything must be explicit. But we forget that if I want to read, if I use the explicit method all the time, I'm going to spell ing, focusing. Do I want to read like that all the time? No. So explicit is important, but that's not all that it's about. People must get to a level of mastery, and that's where you've actually taken the explicit and you've made it tacit. Focusing on knowledge management efforts only within organizational boundaries. Right, because if you are selling this ecologically friendly motor vehicle and your customer doesn't understand why they need this ecologically friendly motor vehicle, you can have the best ecological motor vehicle, but if your customers are not buying it, your product is sunk. So it doesn't help being so bleeding edge that nobody is using your product because they don't understand it. Okay, and basically the types of knowledge in project management, and when we do our lessons learned and when we capture our knowledge, we need to look at all of them. So cultural knowledge, So this is the way that we do things around here. And sometimes you need to talk about that and understand what is the way that we do things around here. I remember when I was at the CSR, we had a session where we were trying to determine the culture of the team that I was the project manager for. And it was one of those sessions where, you know, the person with the biggest mouth ideas got captured, you know, those bad brainstorming sessions. And one of the things which I was very, very, very adamant about was I said that you need to allow people to fail. Okay, and the rest of my team actually didn't agree with me. They said, no, you're not allowed to fail. You must get it right the first time. And I was adamant, and I said, no, you have to allow people to fail, because if you don't allow people to fail, they're not going to try anything new. Am I right? And for months after that, my team would tease me and tell me, oh no, I support failure. Okay, and that was a very good lesson to me, because what I learned there was that my team had zero tolerance for failure. Okay, and that was the cultural knowledge or the cultural message that was inherent in my team. And that is a very, very bad culture to walk into if you're a young person. And we had big challenges in getting young engineers up and running in our team. And until we actually addressed the issue and we structured our projects in such a way that we allowed the young people to first fail, we battled to keep that going. Okay, then we have institutional knowledge. So that's the knowledge that the organization has, the policies. This is what you would write down in the policies and procedures. But there are also, you know, certain ways in which the organization operates. And if this isn't explicit, it makes it very difficult for a new person walking into the organization. Because to give you an example, when I came from UP to here, the system of setting up exam papers, there is no system at UP. Basically, the day before the exam, you decide, oh, okay, I want to ask these questions. You put the questions, you print it out, you give it to somebody, they make copies, and everybody's happy. When you get the papers back, you set up the memorandum and you start marking. Here at TUT, it's like Armageddon when we're setting exam papers. Am I right, doctor? Because you have 20 different forms that you have to fill in, and there's an external, at UP you also at some stage asked the external just to look at the paper, and they maybe signed, you know, on each page of the paper and said it was okay, but there wasn't like a form and a checklist, and you know, so when I first walked in here, I'm a professor, I come from UP, I should know how to set up exam papers. And the first exam paper was a total disaster because I didn't know what the process is. Do you understand? And this institutional knowledge is important, that it should be explicit. Or that at least you should sit the person down and tell them this is the knowledge. This is how it works. Okay, then we have domain knowledge. So this is where, as an electronic engineer, I have certain knowledge about my domain. Because I've worked in defense projects, I have certain knowledge about the military domain. And just in the same manner, you guys all have knowledge about your domains, and you are sitting in this class because you want to learn more about the project management domain. Okay. All right, and then there's process knowledge. So this I suppose would be also where project management knowledge comes in, because this is the process that we follow when we do a project. Okay, and if we are mining ore, this is the process that we follow in order to get from the rock to those lovely heavy gold bars. Okay. Okay, I'm not going to go through this in detail because we've basically discussed most of what is explicit on this slide in the previous slides. Okay, and then in the final analysis, when we come to culture, it's not optional. You have to have a culture that fits knowledge management. Otherwise, knowledge management ain't going to happen. You can spend millions on it, but if your people haven't embraced the idea of knowledge management, it's not going to happen. So if the culture is not knowledge management friendly, no amount of technology, knowledge content, or good project management will make the effort successful. And that is the end of my story for tonight. Okay, and I see that the next class is already walking in. Okay, guys, so remember, next week is test. You write the test here. Remember that? Remember that exam rules are applicable. So bring your student card, switch your cell phone off, bring your pencil cases as you should have them and whatever, because I'm not invigilating, there will be invigilators. All right, so and you know them, they're very strict. And I prefer that you do that so that when you get to the exam, there are no surprises. Okay. Any other questions about the test? These are the themes in the test. Up until there. Okay, so it's agile, emotional intelligence, project maturity, project management information systems, and project knowledge management. Okay, and as far as I know, everything is on my tutor. If I'm wrong, if there's something missing, please drop me an email, I will fix it. But as far as I know, everything is there. Yes. I put that up at 4:30 this afternoon.
I was walking in. I walked slowly.
You must walk faster. Okay, so let me just stop this recording.